Palestinian militants have fired a barrage of mortar shells across the border with Israel. That's in retaliation to hundreds of airstrikes targeting Hamas militant infrastructure. There had been a brief pause in violence overnight that allowed the UN to send a small fuel convoy into Gaza. Fighting has since resumed, and Palestinians are launching a day of demonstrations and strikes in Jerusalem and the West Bank.
An ominous start. Israeli police making arrests in the old city. They scuffle close to Damascus Gate, a sign of heightened tension ahead of planned protests. The demonstrators came to chant against Israel's airstrikes on Gaza and to vent a wider sense of injustice. It's not tolerated for long.
We've just moved from Damascus Gate to here, the flashpoint neighbourhood of Sheikh Jarrah, and across the road you can see the protesters have started their chants again, while watching them on the other side of the road are the Israeli police, and there's definitely a sense of tension in the air.
Jihad.
The police again on the offensive. They move in with stun grenades, rubber bullets and a water cannon that sprays stinking liquid.
هذا الجيل هو جيل الحرية ومش راح تخلص قصتهم غير لما هذا الجيل ينتصر وهذا الجيل منتصر.
These protests were part of a day of demonstrations and strikes in Arab neighbourhoods inside Israel and across the West Bank. This was the scene in Bethlehem. Tear gas fired to push back the crowds. Evidence the conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza has sparked far wider unrest. Little sign of it stopping, with new Israeli airstrikes on the enclave despite efforts to stop the two sides from fighting, and mounting concern about the civilian deaths, though trucks of much-needed aid were allowed in. But this is why Israel says it needs to keep striking. A Hamas rocket fired from Gaza killed 2 Thai workers on an Israeli farm close to the border. For the deputy mayor in Jerusalem, Israel's military action is justified.
They've armed themselves to the teeth with a blockade. Imagine what they would have done without one. We can't trust. You know, Israel can't lose one war. It would be genocide here if we lost one war.
But Palestinians say they can't tolerate the status quo. It'll take much more than a ceasefire to calm these streets.
Let's get a dose of business